I do remember with Metropolitan that certainly Whit and I were just trying to figure out how to work with each other and all of that, just like he was figuring out with everybody else. Yeah. But it was one of those really long walk and talks that we were, I think, doing in one, and it was like there was not going to be any coverage on it. And so he came up and he was like, he's like, I think that's right. But I also think that there needs to be more exquisite bullshit. And I was like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, I know exactly. That's fine. Exquisite bullshit. I have it. That I live in that. I got that. That's no problem.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Chris Eigeman is an actor. I sat down with him in his office in Brooklyn to talk about the work.
You said somewhere, I like everything about acting. I like the incredibly subtle parts and the incredibly unsubtle parts, the hammer blow parts. So it seems like you really, from early on, had this love of this process, of this whole endeavor.
I think that's probably true. I think I got into this because for me personally, because I was a child of the 70s. And I think that meant that my parents were kids in the 50s. And so they were looking to parent differently. And so there were a lot of, running around with books like Free to Be You and Me and all of these things, and really encouraging their kids to go, be artistic and to sort of see what other things they can do. And so that's how I think I just sort of rode that all the way.
Yeah.
And then I thought, then you start realizing how fun it is. And then you realize how hard it is. Like, it can be an incredibly difficult, it can be a huge slog. But I think I got very, very lucky. I think I got incredibly lucky with my first movie.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that to mean that I was lucky that it was successful. That was nice. But because I was very certain no one was going to see that movie, right? I mean, it's a very improbable film. As
you were making it, you were thinking that? Or after, you mean?
Well, before, during, and after, until people actually did. But that was great because I was able to sort of say, well, rather than trying to do this the right way, or the way that I perceive should be the right way, I'm going to do this like I want to.
Oh, that's amazing.
Rather than so you
can see that in your performance.
No one's going to see it, right?
Yeah.
So this to me was sort of like the equivalent of like, this isn't game day. This is like a scrimmage.
Yeah.
So that just was, and then
that is lucky because
incredibly lucky. And then when I saw, oh, okay, well that kind of worked. Like some of that stuff kind of worked. Then I started sort of putting together about how am I going to go and keep doing what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. It was just a nice way to be rewarded for doing a thing the way I thought it should be done, rather than a more sort of schooled way of doing it.
Yes. But that is what every director listening to this should pause and just focus on that. This is what you really want every actor to be living in.
Yeah.
Like, this is not game day. All of the bad things that go with game day. Nervousness. Right. We're never going to do this again. Right. We have to win.
Right.
Is that right? Is that correct?
And the clock is running.
Yeah.
And so we only, so the more you can unring that bell, I've always found really successful. There's another director quote that I really love, which is a Hal Ashby quote, which is, I'm never going to tell an actor what to do on the first couple of takes, because they could be going down a road that I don't even know about, and why deny them the getting down that road? Why deny them that voyage? Even if it's not the right one. So I've always sort of liked that. I mean, it's not great for time management, certainly, but I've always sort of liked that. Like, okay.
Yes.
And that it's the actor's job to bring as much of this to the front as possible, right? It isn't necessarily the director's job.
Yes.
I mean, it just goes back to the thing we were talking about, that, performances by and large, when the performances are great, they are by and large organic. Mm-hmm. And they aren't, certainly my ass has been saved many times by editors. Mm-hmm. And I'll be the first to admit that. Like, I know of places where I screwed up. Mm-hmm. And when watching the film, I'm like, thank you. I know I made the week that you spent on that sequence more difficult and longer than you needed it to be, but I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And then the editor was happy when he got it.
Right.
Or he or she. So they...
Right. At the end of the day, everybody, walked away.
This might not be true for everyone, but there was a time, and it's probably a bad connection now, but people were making the connection, Whit Stillman, Woody Allen. And if you think of Woody Allen and you think of, in a performance way, Woody Allen himself is the Woody Allen style of performance, and people are kind of imitate him or do it in his tone and everything. But I feel like you are the Whit Stillman style of performance. Like, your way you were in those 3 movies, if I had to condense it down, that is his style. But I want to know if you, based on the script or based on his direction, adapted to his style, or was it because, and the way you put it was so wonderful, that you this wasn't game day for you, you were trying things, and was it Whit like turning and saying, wow, he's on something else? I didn't necessarily think of that when I was writing it, but and then he loved that, and he kind of adapted his own thing, wanted you in the other 2 movies, kind of.
That may be true. I do remember with Metropolitan that certainly Whit and I were just trying to figure out how to work with each other and all of that, just like he was figuring out with everybody else. Yeah. But it was one of those really long walk and talks, and that we were, I think, doing in one, and it was like there was not going to be any coverage on it, and so. And he came up and he was like, he's like, I think that's right, but I also think that there needs to be more exquisite bullshit. And I was like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, I know exactly. That's fine. Exquisite bullshit. I have it. That I live in that. I got that. That's no problem. You've come to the right guy here. So, those are the kind of the kind of discussions that he and I would have.
Yeah. So he found someone in you that was able to take what he was trying to do, like just the example you just said there, exquisite bullshit, like you knew exactly what he was saying.
I always knew where the joke was.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful in that movie. Yeah. And in all of Whit, and in anything. I mean, even if I'm, on Gilmore Girls for a while, like I'm pretty good at knowing where the joke is. And if I know where the joke is, then I can figure everything else out. That just sort of like pins it for me, and I can kind of, move along. But particularly in Metropolitan, because, that could be played as a dirge. That entire movie could be played as a dirge.
Yes.
So it was important to sort of know where the joke was.
This whole idea of knowing where the joke was is something that I'm obsessed with. One of my analogies is when I laugh is when the helicopter is landed slightly off the pad.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the joke, you can land it right on the pad, and that some people will laugh, but I won't.
Right. You want the skids a little bit off the target.
You go. Yes.
Yes.
So this whole idea of knowing this, or I feel like it's instinctual. Would you say, or is this something that has developed with you over time? I mean, you had it in your first movie.
It's probably a little bit of both, but I think that that sense of humor and my sense of humor are reasonably allied. So that wasn't, that made it a little bit easier. But also, going back to the idea, no one was going to see this movie.
Right.
So let's just go ahead and, kind of loosen it up here. And you're also shooting in the middle of the night for like 20 nights running. And it was, you know, you got to have a little bit of fun here.
Wait, we need to go back to the audition. You said that you showed up there and it was going to be for like a telephone scene, and everyone's sitting in the audition room.
They brought telephones.
They brought telephones to the audition.
Yeah, I remember that.
Actual rotary phones.
It was old, but it wasn't that old. Like, I mean, there were some buttons. Yeah. But also, you know, remember the largest pool of actors is the pool that thinks that they can play recent college graduates.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it
fit
only winnows.
Right in there,
But it was, you know, it felt like tens of thousands of people.
But what did you think when you saw all these people? You just thought, well, this is a waste of time, right? Probably.
Well, I thought it was statistically unlikely, but but I also think, you know, really early on, well before Metropolitan, like even when I was just starting out in New York City and auditioning for off of Broadway stuff or whatever, I grew, or I sort of made myself understand that you need to enjoy auditioning. You really have to learn to enjoy it. So, and for whatever reason, that nickel dropped pretty easily. So I really was sincerely happy to, you know, take a swing at it.
Yeah.
And I still, you know, I believe that. I remember auditioning for, this was after I got to LA, and, you know, you're just constantly auditioning for television pilots, and that was back in the, you know, 90s and into the 2000s, I guess, a little bit. But I remember auditioning for Aaron Sorkin for Sports Night. And I knew Aaron a little bit. And, you know, there was a million people in the room, and I did it. And Aaron was like, is that the way you would do it? And I was like, oh, that's 100% the way I would do it. Like, I mean, we can fiddle around with it, but at root, that's how I would do it. And he's like, oh no, I don't want that. I'm like, we shouldn't be doing this. And I look back on that and think, like, that was actually one of the more successful auditions.
Right.
The outcome isn't perhaps what you wanted, but it is like, it is that. Like, I don't, you know, right now there's a thing that and maybe this is wrong of me, but there's a thing that, like, if I'm directing in auditions, when I'm auditioning people, young people, if I say something like, you know, that was great, but you know, there's that corner in the scene, take that corner like harder. And they're like, okay, great, thank you. And there's this thank you that I think is taught. And it's I hate it. I hate it more than I can explain. Because I'm like, don't thank me. We're in this together. We're just trying to work this out. Don't. And it's weird how much it bumps me. It really is odd how much it bumps me.
But isn't that an indication of how bad their time usually is in an audition room when they can't even get something genuine like that, a genuine note?
Maybe, I think so.
And
but I also think, like, you should be treating us as equals.
I
mean, yes, there is some power imbalance ultimately, but when we're doing the work, this is equal footing. As far as I'm concerned.
Yes. See, but you're an actor turned director, which is the perfect, you know, route to director, as far as I'm concerned. Then you know how to, you know what actors want or what would make them work best.
Right. And the chances of me saying something that will make them go screaming out of the room is slightly less than others, perhaps. But there are downsides to being an actor who's turned director. One of them, and this is, I mean, I've spoken to other people about this, particularly in the audition process, but actually all the way through, there can be too much empathy. And that can be difficult in its own way, right?
Ooh, interesting.
Where it's like, oh, no, I know you're struggling with this. I just want you not to struggle with this, even though you're probably not right for the part. But I do want you not to, you know what I mean? And so that's, I think that is something, that's why a lot of, why videotape audition stuff is a little bit better, because it's like, you can be a little, and then, then go meet the folks later.
Yes, and sometimes I'm imagining an actor really doesn't need empathy, pure empathy. They need something else.
No, that isn't really part of the work.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that really isn't. Really what it is let's just figure out does this scene play?
Yeah.
Does it play? Or does it just lie there? If it lies there, we got a problem.
Yeah.
I also really believe this 100% as an actor, that if we're on like take 6 or 7 or 8, we should look at the line. It probably isn't going to be a performance thing. Something's probably wrong in the line.
Everyone pause and listen to that again. No one's ever said that. That is, bells went off. It's really true.
Yeah, it is.
That doesn't mean you have to cut it, but you just have to look at it.
You have to look
pause
at it.
everything and look at it.
Right. I mean, that was some of the stuff that came out of doing, 2 years of a sitcom, where the writers are right there.
Yeah.
And so if something didn't work after a little while, then it would just be all the managers to the mound, everybody trying to rethink that line, like something stopping it in the line.
What are some of the characteristics that you apply as a director that you noticed were rare when you were acting and other people were directing you? You know what I mean? In other words, stuff that you needed directors to do or not do that you made sure you do when you're directing.
Probably the best way to answer it is what I don't do, I think.
Yeah.
I have worked with the occasional director. This usually is the directors who've worked for a really, really long time and came up through, not the studio system, but close to the studio system. Like jodhpur wearing directors with, bullhorns. They aren't, but who encourage and stoke fear on sets. And sometimes producers do that too. Particularly if you've gone like 2 or 3 days over schedule, or you're late, you're 5 days behind or whatever, and then suddenly there's a lot of yelling, or there's just stony silence, and I'm like, well, nothing good will come of this. Like nothing good. I mean, it just is not gonna. It's not gonna get better. I think that even if I'm working with kids or young people, like kids or 21-year-olds or whatever, I treat them all like adults, which is good, but it's also bad sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't work because when you're dealing with a 14-year-old, it turns out 14-year-olds aren't adults. It also means that I somehow give myself license to curse in front of young people, and that becomes a bit of a problem. Like, well, that was fucking okay, but you're like, oh no, his mom is right there, and you don't want to say that. But I do try to treat everybody like an adult. And that goes back to the thing of like, look, we're kind of again on equal footing here. So I guess I do that, and I'm always appreciative as an actor when that happens. And I try not to be sneaky. I try not to make stupid jokes, like stupid jokes behind monitor. Like I just think that's really bad. Like, because it's super easy to do. One thing that I think that maybe I'm a little bit on one side of the line rather than the other. If a line isn't letter perfect, that doesn't always need correcting. That said, I spent a lot of time writing these things, so try to get them. And you were talking earlier about talking to a young actor who was proud of the fact that he didn't do anything before he showed up on set. This is very common now with young people.
Yes.
And it is, and you talk to older actors and it can drive them just batshit because, you know,
earpieces and stuff.
Well, it's not even that. It's not even that. It's just like they think, I actually think it's more, young person actor, want to be true in the moment. So let's have the moment just appear and spring on me.
Yeah.
Rather than rehearse the moment.
Yeah.
Which I understand. It's wrong, I think.
Yeah.
It's certainly wrong the way I came up. The writer answer is know it backwards and forwards when you set foot on set. And if you know it backwards and forwards, then you're going to be able to mess around with it and sort of fly and really have fun with it. Because
you got to have that first step. You got to know.
Because otherwise, I don't care. The moment may happen, but I'm still watching you try to remember your lines.
Yeah.
And I can see it. I mean, I'm just watching it. I'm just watching you try to remember your lines.
Yeah.
Which isn't, I mean, that's not good.
No.
So, yeah, but this is a very, it's odd.
Yeah.
I think the easy answer is, well, you know, all the olds, we received our how to act stuff from people who were doing theater generations before us, and that training sort of remained. And that certainly, you know, I went to London to study acting and was thrown out. So that didn't work 100% well, but still that was sort of the tradition.
Right.
And I don't think that is now.
Yeah. Or it seems like even more than ever, there's just no training and people just rely on their instincts. And sometimes that's great and sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to get in trouble. They're heading for trouble.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I loved the first season of Mad Men. I didn't like any of the other seasons, right? I'm real picky. I'm weird.
Right.
But I watched every episode, But the last episode of the first season, I think I never went back and watched it again, but I think it's one of the greatest episodes of anything ever. And she's laying on the couch, January Jones, and she says, Thanksgiving. And then I remember thinking, is this going to be a monologue?
Right.
Like, it was almost like she said, like, the title.
Right.
And I loved it. Right. But I knew it was going to be a monologue. And I still loved it. Usually I hate monologues.
Right.
I just hate monologues in movies. It feels like it's not somebody really saying something, elaborating on a story, doing anything. But I love your monologues, man. Okay. I can watch them over and over again and always love them. I mean, and people have, it seems like, because of the Polly Perkins monologue, which is in your first movie in Metropolitan. It seems like they've given you monologues to do in some of these movies.
Well, that may be true. I mean, the thing that's good for me is I really like doing them because, again, it's sort of the same thing. Like, I will know it cold. I'm sort of lucky in that it doesn't take much for me to learn lines. And then once I know it, then I know I can kind of fuck around inside of it and try to, play with it a little bit one way or the other. So that's lucky. The flip of that coin is if you give me a line with 2 words in it, it's going to be a disaster. And
I heard you say this somewhere. Yeah.
It was true on one of Whit's films, but I remember doing a movie with Frankenheimer where I played the press secretary for LBJ, Bill Moyers.
Oh.
And that was one of those movies. I didn't enjoy doing that movie at all, but it was one of those movies where there was a lot of people sitting around gigantic tables holding forth about the Gulf of Tonkin, specifically in this case the Gulf of Tonkin, and you were just hosing down the actors, right? Just going around the table, just getting everybody. And I think I had literally like a 4-word line Oh, I didn't think we'd ever get out of there. I mean, it was just, and it was one of those things where it was like getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So whereas a monologue, I can just run with it and I'm fine. But if the line is like, I think that's probably true, after 30 other people have said something, it could be.
And what do you think that is? You think that you just get in your head?
The truth of it is, what I would say is there's absolutely no hay to make here. So why are we doing this?
Yeah. But
maybe the deeper and more profound truth is there is no hay for me to make here. Yeah. But the movie still needs it. Yeah. So for me, it's just super unsatisfying. Yeah. And so, selfishly, I'd be like, look, either give me some hay or give me nothing. This middle stuff is no good.
Have someone else do this line.
Right.
Just give.
Right. Can't we give it to Westmoreland? He's right here. Westmoreland will take the line, or whomever.
That's really interesting, though. Because a lot of people cannot handle monologues. They just can't.
They can be daunting. I mean, yeah.
And the idea of what you seem to do is you have a rhythm, and you even adjust the rhythm. I don't know if this is instinctual or whatever, but you're playing in it. Right. You're freely playing it.
And that is the whole dance, I think.
Yeah.
And I think rhythm is, I'm a huge fan of rhythm because you could be talking about something incredibly banal. You can be talking about the dinner you ate or the house that needs repairs, but the audience could know that you're really talking about your dead parent. Mm-hmm. Or something else. You're talking about something else, but the only way that gets over is rhythmically between the characters talking to each other. And so I really like that. I've always think that's and you won't ever, going back to our earlier thing, you won't ever get that if you're struggling with your lines.
Yeah.
You won't ever find the deeper thing if you're just stuck on your words.
And sometimes you can look like, I guess Brando having all the cue cards up. I mean, I'm sure that you can create an illusion of like reality in that way, but he's a genius.
That's the thing, right? And a lot of, you would hear, I never did the show, but you would hear like on ER, they would have notes all over the place, but that's because they were using insane medical terms, right?
Oh, right.
But they were also incredibly good actors. Right. And so I never thought, he's looking at a Post-it. I never thought that once when I watched those guys.
Whit Stillman said that he was a little worried about you because he considered you a dramatic actor.
Oh, this was at the beginning of Metropolitan?
Yeah. Of course, he got over that when really fast, I'm sure. But I wanted to know just what you're coming out of Metropolitan, what were you starting to think about what you wanted to see with this? Did you want it to keep doing this kind of light comedy thing, or were you really looking for stuff that was like really heavy duty drama?
The fact that I grew up out west and would spend my summers being a hand on a ranch in Montana, but then the first movie I do, I'm wearing a cummerbund and I'm cracking wise. That's what people assume.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. With all those guys, with everybody in that movie,
everybody in that film, sure. And there was a little bit of when it was being distributed, there was a little bit of hanky-panky about saying that maybe this was like a documentary, and maybe, which was just nonsense. Like, I don't think any of the people in that movie grew up in that world. I mean, maybe one or two did, but not really. So if that's the way the world, that's the way the world embraces you, you might as well enjoy the embrace. Mm-hmm. And it meant that I got to work with people whose writing and directing I really love, like Amy Sherman-Palladino and Dan Palladino, Peter Melman in the sitcoms, and Noah Baumbach too. Mm-hmm. So I am not comparing myself to this actor because he's a really, really, really remarkably wonderful actor. But after Hugh Grant's first movie, which would have been what, 4 Weddings? Or the first movie that we all saw, might have been 4 Weddings, whatever.
Wow, yeah.
And somehow he was talking about, doing more dramatic things. And I think a producer or his agent looked at him and said, like, Hugh, nobody's going to put a gun in your hand. And I think of that because it was like, Chris, no one's going to put a gun in your hand. Right. And you're like, oh, okay. That's good to know. So stop barking up that tree.
But I immediately pictured you with a gun in your hand, and I love that movie, whatever it is.
Yeah,
I want to see that.
Yeah. Listen, I like that movie too. I just don't know if you could get that movie financed.
Right.
It's so that.
So that's what I guess every actor has to come to, which is after you get in the pool, like after you got to kind of size yourself up.
Right.
You got to face some truths here from your people and from
and it's show business. It's business, right? So, and if you want to tell, and this is what happened with me, is like if you want to tell other stories, if you are not being invited to tell stories that you would like to tell, then you need to start writing those stories and figuring out ways to get those stories made. As an actor, I think there is a world out there where I would have been just as artistically fulfilled had I been working in a very small theater in a mid-sized city somewhere where we were doing, 5 plays a year, 3 of them brand new. And everybody was doing different stuff. That's sort of the theater that I grew up watching in Denver. There were all these little theaters doing crazy shit. Certainly legendary theaters that came out of Chicago are like that and continue to this day. I could have gone down that road. But that's not the road I decided to go down. So, and you can't get grumpy about those decisions, right?
No.
You just can't.
This is something that has come up a lot in these talks with actors. And it's something that I didn't realize before talking to people. And I started to think, wow, this is really an interesting bit of knowledge, and it changed my thinking of things. And then just recently, I thought it could be a little dangerous to think like this, but let me throw it at you, which is people are saying that you need to understand first and foremost what your role is in the story, what your character is serving the story. This is really important. And it's the way it was told to me, it's almost like it's even more important than knowing any of the backstory of your character, any of the maybe I shouldn't make up. No one really said that explicitly. Like it's more important than that. But the implication is that that really is like this is first. Like
So that I think is 100% true. I mean, that's a Spencer Tracy quote, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Where Spencer Tracy was always very interested in what is my role in it? Like, where do I fit? And if I'm not mistaken, he would sometimes do things like he would memorize the entire script, but then he would take out stuff that his character wouldn't know about. He would tear that out of script. But I think that's true. And this is another thing that's falling apart, which is really too bad. I mean, at least in my experience, it's falling apart. But table reads, table reads are diminishing. First of all, because so much could go wrong, right?
Yes.
And actors don't like it because they think they can get fired off a table read. And I have been part of some just titanic disaster table reads.
Yeah.
But, the thing that I think is great about table reads, both as an actor and a director, and this is just for films, this isn't for plays.
Yeah.
Everything that I say about films holds true for plays, but people do table reads for plays every single time.
Yeah, it's almost like a given.
Right. It's sacred.
Yeah.
In film, it's sort of falling apart. Part of it's because people's schedules, they can't all show up and which I get. But, the table read in a film that's the first and probably only time that entire cast will be together.
Yeah.
And frequently characters are talking about other characters who are not in the scenes with them.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be bad for you to be able to look across the table and see, oh, this is who I'm talking about. And again, that goes to it of like, what is your role
right
in the entire story? Like we got to drag this thing over the finish line. But those are just going away. And also you have at those table reads in films, you'll just see this wild mishmash of styles.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, let's just stop this right now.
Yeah, it's a big story came out that Joaquin Phoenix did not want to do the table read
Of Joker?
for Joker, and De Niro was forcing it to happen, and the director didn't know what to do. He didn't want to upset Bobby, but he also didn't want to upset a star, so he forced Joaquin Phoenix to do the table read, and he did it according to the article in a very robotic way just to get through it.
Yep.
And then
it's really I'm trying to think who. Basically, my entire podcast is me just quoting other people, but
that's great.
I think it was maybe somebody like Kevin Kline said. In fact, I do think it was Kevin Kline who said that in table reads that he is more than happy to make a fool of himself.
Yeah.
To just swing wildly.
Right.
And that shows a sort of like, certainly confidence, right? And a great security in what you're able to do.
Yeah.
And also a kind of fantastic lack of self-consciousness.
Yes.
Which, I mean, if anything is going to kill an actor, it's self-consciousness.
Yes.
So
it's a good opportunity then, is what
it's
you're
a
saying.
fantastic, it can be the best opportunity. Like I've always said, until I've gotten gun shy about table reads, I'm like, this is not for me. Like I'm not, as a director and as an actor, I've always been like, this is a time to really try to figure out stuff.
Yeah.
But it's really for the actors, I think.
I had Mike Lee on one of the rare times I talked to a director, but him, I'll make a space for,
right,
obviously. But he says that it is dangerous to have a table read. He says that, but I'm sure he has a lot of things that are radically different for how he approaches it. But this is when it got me thinking about actors wanting to know their place in the story. He specifically shelters actors away from that knowledge.
But he's working in it. First of all, he's
different way,
one
right?
of the greatest living filmmakers right now, right? And he has been. Even the films of his that don't completely, or that I don't completely embrace, I still admire the shit out of, right?
Yes.
But he's working in a system that we've never ever had in America.
Yes.
Like he has the resources, and God bless him for it, and God bless all the funding entities that are around, like the British Lottery first and foremost, probably.
Yeah.
Where he can workshop something for 6 months. So if you can workshop, I mean that's 100%. Do that. I mean, we just don't. There are very few directors in America who can work that way.
Yes. It's almost like what you're saying is, if you're going to give me an opportunity to live as this character, then and I can breathe as him for months.
Right.
Then if you want to keep me away from every other thing that's going on in the story, then that's fine. I could live in that. I could work in that.
Right.
But short of that, I need a table read. Right. I mean, I need to understand what this.
If I'm employed as an actor for 8 months with you, then go ahead, tell me nothing. Keep me fine. I mean, we're still working and we're still trying to put it together and we're still doing what we're supposed to be doing. It's just in our system we just don't have that.
Yeah.
We don't really have that ability. So we have to sort of make do.
So just to sum up, what's happening is if that's going away, if the table read's going away, then that means that if there's not a table read and there's very varying tones, people coming day one on the set, on their own day one, then it's really on the director's job to really set those tones. And if he or she is not good enough, you have a bad movie basically because of these varying tones.
You do have to be a bit of a tone police, but you also, I mean, the easier way I've always found to think of it is that as a director, even if I'm directing a play, I'm just the everyman audience. that's really just my job, is just to be the sort of meta audience. So hopefully that gets you to make sure that these performances actually have some kind of relationship with each other.
Yeah. You seem to be focusing much more on directing nowadays than acting.
I think a little bit more. I mean, a couple of things happened where, I mean, when I had a kid, I was like, I don't want to travel at all. Like, I just don't want to travel. I'm just not into it. Like, we had a place in LA, and when we had a kid, I just was like, I don't want to do that. Or I want to do that as little as I can, if I can find a way. So then I was able to write stuff and keep things going and occasionally direct stuff. But now I think I'll probably get more into acting. You know, my boy's older.
Is there anything that you can think of performance-wise that you always wanted to do, that you never got the chance to do, and that you are hoping to get the chance to do, or hoping to show that you can do?
You mean other than putting a gun in my hand? I thought we pretty much covered.
Do you really dream? Do you dream of the gun? Do you dream?
I don't, or I'm sure I did when I first came up. Right? Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's gonna be good. French Connection 3. Right? We could do this. That movie is screaming to be made. You know what I'm sort of looking forward to, because I've never really done it. Like Josh has done it. Josh Hamilton's done it quite well. Is play a parent. Yeah. Like I think I did it. I did it in a pilot a couple times maybe, and but like that seems like a really interesting. Like I've never done that, so I look forward to that. Yeah. Obviously a parent without a gun in his hand, but I also look forward in a weird way. Like I was sort of driving the narrative until I sort of step back in terms of acting a little bit, right? And if I get back into it, right, if I'm invited back in and whatever, what will be offered? Like what, you know what I mean? I'm just sort of curious, like that. I think like what kind of roles would people be even quasi interested in me taking a whack at? Like I find that, you know, like there were a lot of roles that I always turned down. Because they were always roles that I was like, I mean, there were violent roles, but they were always like, you know, like preppy killer roles. And like, I have no interest. So that kind of stuff would always crop up, right? Like, I'm trying to think of others without actually saying titles, but things that I was like, it would probably be a really interesting emotional acting experience for me to do this, but I'm going to have a kid and I don't need that. I would feel very uncomfortable having my kid, you know, see that stuff. Like Robert Chambers. I think I was offered Robert Chambers like 4 different ways.
No, wait, no, I don't know who that is.
Robert Chambers. Right. He's not a guy. The Preppy murder case. They're just redoing, they're doing it right now on Sundance, right?
Yes.
Dorian Red Hand was the bar.
Yes.
And the rough sex defense. And I literally was offered like
4
different versions of that role, where I was like, how? First of all, but this was like right after it happened, right? So there was like Law and Order, Robert Chambers, and I mean, literally there was Law and Order, Robert Chambers, and then there was like something else, Robert Chambers, and something else, and I'm like, I'm not playing Robert Chambers under no. I mean, I don't know who I need to send this memo to.
You have to have that on your headshot,
right? On my IMDb, will not play Robert Chambers.
Give it up. I am not.
Okay. What you throw at me, I'm not playing Robert Chambers.
It's also an indication of the lack of imagination in these casting people.
Yeah, well,
this is it's just so. Maybe that's changing, though. I don't know.
I think it is. I think that the casting directors are always now really willing to like Lewis and Clark out and find like, but I know that, but what about this? You know, which I think is great. I like that. And that can make me as an actor look incredibly good. It can make me as a director look really good. So I rely heavily on casting directors.
Yes. I look forward to this next chapter.
Yeah, you and me both.
In your life, and I'm going to keep watching. Chris Eigeman, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming here. This was fantastic.
And let's say thank you to Kaveh Zahedi for hooking us up.
For getting us together. Thank you, Kaveh.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.